My father, I will call F, told me this story from his childhood very recently, and as a firm believer in ghosts, I decided I needed to do some research on it. If anyone knows any legends or stories that sound familiar to this, please give me your thoughts. For reference, my father lived in a cabin on stilts, right next to a river in the mountains as a child. He was around 10 when this happened. The long driveway that led to his house, along with the other cabin that belonged to a family friend and was primarily used as a vacation home, had a sort of on one of the sides. It went down rather far and trees filled the area. Where the land became flat, there sat an old trailer, one of the small ones. Part of the river was nearby it, which will later be important to the story. Keep in mind that no one in the family ever spoke about this trailer, and, as far as my father could remember, it was never even acknowledged. So, F and his cousin, C, would constantly explore places that most people would walk away from, even as young children. I've been told stories of them climbing down into caves with only a flashlight, or just waltzing into abandoned cabins in the middle of the woods without a second thought. Yet, they never went down to that trailer. F said that they would often look down the hill to the trailer, but never climbed down due to the intensely negative vibe the place gave off. One night, F and C were playing around outside around dusk. For some reason or another they ended up at the top of the hill, looking down at the trailer. This time though, it was different. Near the top of the trailer, there was a small window, a small little port window kind of thing. They saw a face looking back at them through the window and immediately booked it. They ran down the driveway back towards the cabin, panicked about what they had just seen. When F looked back, they saw a floating head chasing after them. F had a hard time describing the head, as it had been a long time since this event took place, but he kept reiterating that it had a strange kind of glow to it. The way he described it was if you look at a light bulb, it was like the aura around it. C had said that it seemed like a fireball. When they arrived back at the cabin's front porch, the head was no longer chasing them and was nowhere in sight. They never told their parents about the experience, because a floating head was chasing us. Who's gonna believe that? Later, I believe a year or so later, but it could have been longer, a huge flood hit the area. The waters were so deep that the entire trailer would have been completely submerged. When the floodwaters receded, the trailer was gone, washed away with the water. No one in the family ever mentioned it or spoke about it, and no trace of it was ever seen again. August 2018, we decided to visit the Stanley Hotel on vacation. We checked in, and while the others were grabbing our suitcases, etc., I went up to see our room. Inside the room, while I was waiting, I heard what sounded like young girls screaming. Sounded close, but not very loud. I looked in the hall and out the window, saw nothing. I woke very early the next morning, 6:45 a.m., and thought I heard a young girl singing. It was quiet, but clear. Everyone was asleep, nobody in the hall or outside the windows. I wasn't scared, just curious. There were 3 large windows in our room. Old style, no screens, you have to push them up to open them. Painted over a few times so they were hard to open. One of the windows slammed shut twice while we were in that room. Slammed so hard that a small piece of wood broke off of the frame and landed on the floor. On the second night we switched rooms with the other family members. Now in room 321, all quiet at bedtime, but very shortly after we settled in, my husband said he couldn't sleep. He is not a believer in spirits. He said the room suddenly felt strange, and he felt like someone was watching us. After he fell asleep, I thought I heard a radio playing, sounded like an old transistor radio. I looked over at the cell phones to make sure they hadn't started auto-playing something. They were both dark. A minute or two after that I heard what sounded like a man whispering, very close to my ear. I couldn't understand any words. A quick look at hubby, he was facing away from me sound asleep. Shortly after that, just as I was drifting off, I felt 2 distinct pokes on my pillow. as if someone used their finger and tapped the pillow hard. I look at my husband, he was still facing the other way, snoring. None of these things scared me, I was busy trying to analyze and found them interesting. In the morning we found, the flashlight on my husband's cell phone was on. He said he hadn't touched it, and remember, I looked at the phones after hearing what sounded like a radio and they were both dark. Putting my bracelet on that morning, I noticed 2 bruises on my arm. I hadn't seen them the night before when I took my bracelet off and had no idea how they got there. They matched perfectly with where an index finger and pinky would sit if my arm had been grabbed with force. My daughter came in as we were all leaving for breakfast and I noticed a large scratch/rash on the side of her neck. She had no idea it was there, how it got there, and said it did not hurt. It had faded and was gone by evening.